Picture the sprawling city of Los Angeles, a place where dreams are born under the bright lights of Hollywood and shadows stretch long across forgotten corners. In the wealthy enclave of Beverly Hills, the Grayson family reigns supreme, their names synonymous with power and privilege. But 6 years ago, they made a choice that would haunt the edges of their perfect world. At 18, Isabel Grayson, their adopted daughter, was sent away to a private psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of the city. The official story was simple. She was schizophrenic, unstable, a danger to herself and those around her. Her family claimed they had no choice but to lock her up, to protect their own. Yet beneath the surface, something darker simmered, a secret they buried alongside her freedom. For 6 long years, Isabel lived within those cold gray walls. The world outside moved on, but inside, time stood still. She was labeled crazy, her voice silenced, her spirit tested by isolation and despair. The hospital became her prison, a place where hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Still, she clung to a quiet strength, a flicker of defiance that refused to fade. She wasn't born into the Grayson family, she was brought into it, a child taken in for reasons no one ever explained. Growing up, she felt their indifference, their preference for their biological daughter, Abigail, but nothing prepared her for the day they turned their backs completely, driving away as she stood alone at the hospital gates, her life unraveling before it had even begun. Across the city, in the bustling tech hub of Silicon Valley, Jasper Reed commands a different kind of empire. At 32, he's the CEO of Reed Technologies, a man whose innovations have reshaped the world. His wealth is staggering, his influence unmatched, yet his life is a fortress of solitude. To the public, he's a cold, calculating figure, a billionaire who thrives on control, but those who look closer might catch the shadow in his eyes, a remnant of the day he lost his mother, the one person who ever truly knew him. Her death left a void he's never filled, a wound he hides behind boardroom doors and late-night work. Jasper built his success from the ground up, but it came at a cost, a heart that rarely lets anyone in. Their worlds couldn't be more different. Isabel stripped of everything, trapped in a place that stripped her of her name, her identity. Jasper standing at the pinnacle of power, surrounded by luxury, yet isolated by choice. Los Angeles ties them together, a city of stark contrasts where the glamorous streets of Hollywood lie just miles from the forgotten outskirts. Isabel's days are marked by the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of locked doors. Jasper's are filled with the buzz of innovation and the weight of decisions that move millions. They exist on opposite ends of the spectrum, one a prisoner of circumstance, the other a king of his own making. Then, on a rainy afternoon, fate intervenes. Jasper visits the psychiatric hospital not out of kindness but business. He's there to fund a new research project, a chance to blend technology with medicine. As he walks the sterile halls, a sound stops him in his tracks, a soft, haunting melody drifting from a corner. It's Isabel, sitting alone, singing a song his mother once loved. Her voice cuts through the silence, raw and unbroken despite years of confinement. He doesn't know her name, her story, or the truth behind her presence there, but in that moment, something shifts. Their paths collide, setting off a chain of events that will unravel secrets, spark a love neither saw coming, and change their lives forever. Isabel Grayson's earliest memories flicker like half-forgotten dreams, soft moments of a childhood spent in the sprawling Grayson mansion in Beverly Hills. The house was a palace of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, a world of wealth she never quite felt part of. She wasn't born a Grayson, she was chosen, plucked from an orphanage at the age of 4 by Daniel and Eleanor Grayson. They dressed her in fine clothes, gave her a room with silk curtains, but their smiles never reached their eyes. Isabel grew up watching Abigail, their biological daughter, bask in their love, while she lingered on the edges, a quiet shadow in their perfect family. She didn't understand why she felt like a guest in her own home, but she learned early to keep her questions to herself, to bury the ache of wanting to belong. At 18, everything changed. Isabel had always been a dreamer, her heart full of songs and stories she scribbled in secret notebooks. She longed for a life beyond the Grayson gates, a chance to find her own place in the world. But that dream shattered one humid summer night. She overheard a hushed conversation in the study, Daniel's voice low and tense, Eleanor's sharp with worry. They spoke of a trust fund, a fortune left by Isabel's unknown grandmother, money meant for her alone. It was worth $500 million, a legacy they couldn't touch unless Isabel was out of the picture. Her breath caught as she realized they weren't protecting her, they were plotting against her. Before she could process the betrayal, Daniel turned, saw her standing there, and his face hardened into something she'd never seen before. The next morning, they acted swiftly. Eleanor wept crocodile tears as she packed Isabel's things, murmuring about how they had no choice, how she'd become unstable. Daniel called a doctor, a man with cold hands and colder words, who scribbled a diagnosis of schizophrenia on a clipboard without ever looking into Isabel's eyes. She tried to argue, her voice trembling with panic, but they drowned her out with lies. They said she'd been hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there, that she was a danger to Abigail. Isabel's pleas fell on deaf ears as they drove her to a private psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a squat building surrounded by chain-link fences and dying trees. The car pulled away, leaving her standing in the gravel lot, clutching a single suitcase, her heart pounding with the realization that she'd been erased from their lives. Inside those walls, Isabel's world shrank to a series of locked doors and whitewashed rooms. The staff treated her like a ghost, their voices clipped and distant, their hands rough when they forced pills down her throat. She wasn't crazy, but they made her feel like she might be. Days blurred into nights, each one heavier than the last. The other patients shuffled past her in a haze, some screaming, some silent, but Isabel kept to herself, her only comfort the songs she hummed under her breath. She'd sit by the barred window, watching the sky shift from blue to gray, whispering to herself that she'd survive this, that one day she'd walk free. Her spirit bent under the weight of isolation, but it never broke. She held onto a quiet fire, a belief that the truth would set her free, even if she didn't yet know what that truth was. 6 years passed in that prison of despair. Isabel turned 24, her youth slipping away behind those sterile walls. The Graysons never visited, never called, their silence a louder betrayal than their words had ever been. She heard whispers from the nurses about Abigail, how she'd blossomed into a socialite, how the family thrived without her. Each rumor stung, a fresh wound on a heart already scarred, yet Isabel refused to let bitterness consume her. She'd lie awake at night, tracing the cracks in the ceiling, imagining a life where someone saw her, really saw her, not as a problem to be locked away, but as a person worth loving. It was a fragile hope, but it kept her breathing, kept her holding on when everything else faded. The hospital became her unwanted home, its routines a cruel rhythm she couldn't escape. Mornings brought tasteless meals and forced group sessions where she sat mute. Afternoons dragged with the hum of flickering lights, and nights echoed with the cries of others lost in their own torment. She stopped fighting the label they'd pinned on her, not because she believed it, but because resistance only brought more restraints. Still, in the quiet moments, she'd sing softly, her voice a lifeline to the girl she used to be. It was her rebellion, her way of claiming a piece of herself they couldn't touch. She didn't know if anyone would ever hear her, if anyone would care, but she sang anyway, pouring her longing into every note. Then, on a rainy afternoon in late spring, the air thick with the scent of wet earth, something shifted. Isabel sat beneath the overhang of the hospital's courtyard, her hair damp against her face, her voice rising in a melody she barely remembered. It was Moon River, a song her mother, a woman she'd never known, might have loved. She sang for herself, for the dreams they'd stolen, for the life she still wanted to live. Unbeknownst to her, a man stood just beyond the fence, his dark coat slick with rain, his eyes fixed on her. Jasper Reed had come to the hospital on business, a routine visit to fund a project, but her voice stopped him cold. It reached into the hollow place inside him, stirring memories of his mother's gentle humming, of a time when he'd felt whole. He didn't know her name, didn't know the pain she carried, but he felt her in that song, a pull he couldn't explain. As the last note faded into the drizzle, Isabel looked up, her gaze catching his for a fleeting second. She didn't know who he was, didn't know the empire he ruled or the power he held. All she saw was a stranger in the rain, a man whose eyes held something she hadn't seen in years. Curiosity, maybe even kindness. Jasper lingered there, the sound of her voice echoing in his mind, a thread tying him to her in a way he couldn't yet understand. For Isabel, it was just another day, another moment of clinging to hope. But for Jasper, it was the beginning of something new, a spark that would soon ignite into a flame neither of them could extinguish. Their story was about to unfold, born from the ashes of her past and the shadows of his present, a love waiting to be discovered. Rain fell steadily over the psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a gray curtain blurring the world beyond the chain-link fence. Isabel Grayson sat beneath the courtyard overhang, her thin sweater clinging to her shoulders, damp from the drizzle. She didn't mind the cold. It was a reminder she could still feel something. Her fingers traced the edge of a worn bench as she hummed Moon River, the notes soft and unsteady, a melody she clung to like a lifeline. She closed her eyes, letting the song carry her away from the locked doors and watchful eyes, back to a time when she'd dreamed of freedom. Her voice rose, fragile but clear, a whisper of the girl she used to be. Jasper Reed stood just beyond the fence, his dark coat slick with rain, his driver waiting patiently by the sleek black car behind him. He'd come to the hospital to finalize a deal, $1 million grant for a tech-driven medical project. It was business as usual, another checkbox on his endless list. But as he stepped out of the car, adjusting his collar against the downpour, that sound caught him. A woman's voice, faint yet piercing, drifted through the damp air. He froze, the melody tugging at a memory buried deep, his mother singing in their old house, her voice warm against the quiet of a rainy evening. Jasper turned toward the sound, his gaze landing on Isabel. She sat alone, her dark hair falling in wet strands across her face, her eyes closed as she sang. He moved closer, boots crunching on wet gravel, until he stood a few feet from the fence. She didn't notice him, lost in her song, and for a moment he didn't want her to. There was something raw in her voice, something that reached into the hollow place he'd carried since his mother's death. He watched her, this stranger in a faded sweater, and felt an ache he couldn't name. The rain blurred her figure, but her presence was sharp, undeniable. When the song ended, Isabel opened her eyes, her breath catching as she saw him standing there, their gazes locked, a fleeting second that felt like an eternity. She tilted her head, curious but guarded, and Jasper felt his pulse quicken. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with suspicion. Jasper hesitated, unused to being questioned so directly. "Jasper Reed," he said finally, his tone clipped but softer than he intended. "I'm here on business." Isabel studied him, her green eyes narrowing. "Business doesn't bring people out in the rain to stare at me." A faint smile tugged at his lips, unexpected and fleeting. "Maybe it does today." He stepped closer to the fence, the metal cold against his fingers. "That song, where did you learn it?" She frowned, pulling her sweater tighter. "I don't know. It's just something I remember." Her words were cautious, but her voice trembled, betraying a longing she couldn't hide. "Why do you care?" "Because it reminds me of someone," Jasper said, his gaze steady on hers. "Someone I lost." Isabel didn't reply, but something softened in her expression, a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She stood, brushing damp hair from her face, and took a tentative step toward the fence. "You shouldn't be here," she said, almost to herself. "They don't like visitors watching us." "Then maybe it's time someone did," Jasper replied, his voice low, resolute. He didn't know why he said it, why this woman's song had rooted him to the spot, but he couldn't walk away, not yet. Inside the hospital, a nurse called Isabel's name, sharp and impatient, breaking the moment. She flinched, glancing back, then turned to Jasper. "I have to go," she said, her eyes lingering on him. "Don't come back." But Jasper didn't move as she walked away, her figure disappearing into the building. He stood there, rain soaking through his coat, her voice echoing in his mind. Back at his office in Silicon Valley that night, he couldn't focus. Reports piled up, but all he saw was her face. All he heard was that song. He called his assistant, his voice firm. "Find out who she is. The girl in the courtyard. I need her file." The next day, Jasper returned, this time with purpose. He met with the hospital director, a nervous man who stammered under Jasper's icy stare. "Her name's Isabel Grayson," the director said, sliding a thin folder across the desk. "Been here 6 years. Family says she's schizophrenic, dangerous." Jasper flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening. The diagnosis was vague, the evidence thinner than the paper it was written on. "This isn't a patient file," he said, tossing it back. "It's a cover-up. Get her out of here. Today." The director paled. "But her family." "I don't care about her family," Jasper snapped. "She's coming with me." Hours later, Isabel stood outside the hospital gates, a small bag in her hands. The rain finally stopped. Jasper approached, his car idling nearby. "You're free," he said, his voice gentler now. "I've got a place in Malibu. You can stay there until you figure things out." Isabel looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice raw. "You don't even know me." Jasper met her gaze, his answer simple, unguarded. "Because I heard you sing." She didn't respond, but her fingers tightened around the bag, and she nodded. As they drove toward Malibu, the city lights blurring past, Isabel stared out the window, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Jasper glanced at her, his hand steady on the wheel, wondering what he'd just set in motion. Neither spoke, but the silence between them was alive, charged with something neither could name, a fragile thread pulling them closer. The Malibu sun dipped low over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink as Isabel Grayson stood on the balcony of Jasper Reed's sprawling seaside villa. It had been a week since he'd brought her here, a week since she'd left the hospital's cold walls behind. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, its waves a steady rhythm that soothed the jagged edges of her heart. She wore a simple white dress Jasper had left in her room, the fabric soft against her skin, a stark contrast to the rough hospital garb she'd known for years. She still felt like an intruder in this world of luxury, but the quiet beauty of the place wrapped around her like a tentative embrace. Jasper watched her from the doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his tie loosened after a long day at Reed Technologies. He'd given her space, sensing the wariness in her every move, but he couldn't keep his eyes off her. There was something about Isabel, a strength beneath her fragility, that drew him in. She wasn't like the polished women who flocked to his events, all calculated smiles and empty flattery. She was real, raw, a puzzle he wanted to understand. He stepped onto the balcony, his shoes clicking softly against the wood, and she turned, her green eyes catching the last light of day. "You're staring again," Isabel said, her voice teasing but laced with uncertainty. Jasper smirked, leaning against the railing. "Can't help it. You look different out here. Less like a ghost." She tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truth," he replied, taking a sip of his drink. "You've got color in your cheeks now. Suits you." Isabel looked away, her fingers tightening on the railing. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice dropping. "Being free, being here with you." Jasper set his glass down, stepping closer. "You don't have to know," he said gently. "Just take it one day at a time. I'm not asking for anything more." She met his gaze, searching his face for something, maybe a lie, maybe a catch. But all she saw was sincerity, a warmth that made her chest ache. Over the next few days, that warmth grew. Jasper insisted she work as his assistant, a job she stumbled through at first. One morning she spilled coffee across his desk, soaking a stack of papers. She froze, bracing for anger, but he just laughed, a deep, genuine sound that startled her. "Relax, Isabel," he said, grabbing a towel. "It's just coffee. I've got worse messes in the boardroom." She fumbled with an apology, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to this, to messing up and not being punished." Jasper paused, his eyes softening. "You're not there anymore. No one's punishing you here." He handed her the towel, their fingers brushing, and she felt a jolt, a spark she couldn't name. That night, a storm rolled in, rain pounding against the villa's windows. Isabel couldn't sleep, the thunder echoing the chaos she'd carried for years. She slipped downstairs, finding Jasper in the living room, a fire crackling in the hearth. He looked up from his laptop, concern flickering across his face. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. "Storms remind me of that place. The noise, the fear." He closed the laptop, patting the couch beside him. "Sit, tell me." Isabel hesitated, then sank into the cushions, the warmth of the fire seeping into her. She started slowly, her voice trembling. "They locked me away because I heard something I shouldn't have. About money, a trust fund. They called me crazy to keep me quiet. 6 years, Jasper. 6 years of being nothing." He listened, his jaw tight, his hand resting on the back of the couch, close but not touching. When she finished, tears glistened in her eyes, and he spoke, his voice low. "They were wrong about you. You're not nothing. You're stronger than they'll ever be." She looked at him, her breath catching. "How do you know that?" "Because you're still here," he said, his hand sliding to hers, warm and steady. "You survived them. That takes more than they'll ever have." Isabel didn't pull away, her fingers curling around his. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a burden or a secret, but as herself. The days that followed deepened their bond. Jasper taught her small things, how to use the office software, how to laugh at her own mistakes. She began to trust him, to let the walls around her heart crumble piece by piece. One evening, he took her to the beach below the villa, the sand cool beneath their bare feet. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the waves. Jasper stopped, turning to her, his eyes intense. "Come here," he said, his voice soft but firm. She stepped closer, her heart racing. He took her hands, pulling her into a slow, hesitant dance, the sound of the ocean their only music. "I've built everything I have," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "But this, with you, feels like the first thing that matters." Isabel's chest tightened, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared, Jasper, scared to feel this. What if it's not real?" He stopped, cupping her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "It's real to me. You're real to me. I've been alone too long, Isabel. You make me want to stop running." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I don't know how to love someone, not after everything." "Then let me show you," he said, his lips hovering near hers. "We'll figure it out together." Their first kiss was tentative, a brush of lips that deepened into something fierce, a promise unspoken but felt in every heartbeat. Isabel pulled back, breathless, her hands trembling against his chest. "I want this," she whispered, "but I'm afraid I'll break it." Jasper smiled, a rare, unguarded smile. "You won't. And if you do, I'll fix it. I'm good at fixing things." She laughed, a small, shaky sound, and rested her forehead against his. The ocean roared beside them, a witness to a love taking root amid their scars. But beneath the joy, doubts lingered. Isabel couldn't shake the fear that her past would catch up, that the label of crazy would taint what they were building. She saw it in the mirror sometimes, the girl she'd been, locked away and screaming. Could she really be enough for a man like Jasper? A man who'd conquered the world? Jasper felt his own shadows stirring. He'd lost his mother to illness, watched her fade despite his wealth, his power. Loving Isabel meant risking that pain again, letting someone in when he'd sworn never to. He'd catch her watching him, her eyes full of wonder and worry, and he'd wonder if he could protect her from the world that had hurt her so badly. She's waking me up, he thought one night, staring at the ceiling, and it terrifies me. Their love grew in quiet moments, a shared coffee in the morning, a late-night talk by the fire, a walk along the shore. But it wasn't perfect. Isabel flinched at loud noises, her hands shaking when memories crept in. Jasper withdrew sometimes, his walls rising when work overwhelmed him. Yet they kept reaching for each other, drawn by a pull neither could resist. One afternoon, Isabel found a photo in Jasper's study, a young woman with his eyes, smiling beside a teenage Jasper. "Your mother?" she asked, holding it up. He nodded, his voice tight. "Clara. She died when I was 16. Cancer." Isabel set the photo down, stepping closer. "I'm sorry. I know what it's like to lose someone, even if I never knew my real mom." He looked at her, his expression softening. "You've lost more than I have, and you're still standing." "So are you," she said, her hand finding his. "Maybe that's why we fit." Jasper pulled her into his arms, holding her close, the photo a silent witness to their shared pain. They were two broken pieces, jagged and worn, but together they felt whole. Isabel knew she wanted answers about her past, about the Graysons, but for now she let herself sink into this, into him. Jasper knew he'd fight for her, whatever came next. Their love was fragile, a flame flickering in the dark, but it burned brighter with every touch, every word, every scar they dared to share. The Malibu villa hummed with quiet tension as Isabel Grayson sat at the dining table, a stack of papers spread before her. It was late, the ocean outside a dark expanse under a moonless sky. Jasper Reed had been digging into her past for weeks, his resources uncovering fragments of a truth she'd long suspected but never dared face. He slid a folder across the table, his expression grim. "This is it," he said, his voice steady but edged with something raw. "Everything about the Graysons, about you." Isabel's hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning the documents. Birth records, financial statements, a will. Her breath caught as the pieces clicked together. She wasn't just an orphan taken in by Daniel and Eleanor Grayson. She was the illegitimate daughter of Daniel and a woman named Marianne, a secret lover he'd hidden from the world. Marianne had died, giving birth to her, leaving behind a trust fund worth $500 million, willed to Isabel by her grandmother. The Graysons had locked her away to claim it, branding her schizophrenic to erase her from the picture. "They didn't just abandon me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They stole my life." Jasper knelt beside her, his hand covering hers. "They won't get away with it," he said, his tone fierce. "We'll make them pay, Isabel. Together." She looked at him, tears welling up. "Why are you doing this? This isn't your fight." He squeezed her hand, his eyes locking with hers. "It is now. You're mine to protect. I won't let them hurt you again." The words sank into her, a lifeline in the storm of her anger and pain. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I want to face them. I need to." Jasper spent days preparing, his team gathering evidence, bank records, falsified medical reports, even a recorded call where Daniel admitted the plan. But the real breakthrough came late one night when Jasper found a locked box in his mother's old study, untouched since her death. Inside was a letter from Clara Reed, his mother, dated 16 years ago. He read it aloud to Isabel, his voice shaking. "If you find this, Jasper, know that Marianne was my dearest friend. Her daughter Isabel is out there. If she's alive, protect her. It's the debt I owe." Isabel stared at him, stunned. "Your mother knew mine." Jasper nodded, folding the letter carefully. "She wanted me to find you. This isn't just about us, Isabel. It's bigger than that." She reached for him, her fingers brushing his cheek. "You're my miracle," she said softly. "I didn't think anyone would ever care this much." He pulled her close, his lips pressing against her forehead. "You're my miracle, too. I was lost until you." Their resolve hardened, and the chance came soon after. The Graysons were hosting a charity gala at a downtown Los Angeles hotel, a glittering affair packed with the city's elite. Jasper secured invitations, his arm around Isabel as they stepped into the ballroom. She wore a sleek black gown he'd chosen, her head high despite the nerves twisting in her stomach. Abigail Grayson spotted them first, her smile faltering as she crossed the room, her blonde hair gleaming under the chandeliers. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low. "You don't belong with these people." Isabel met her gaze unflinching. "I belong more than you know. You can't hide me anymore." Abigail smirked, stepping closer. "You're still the crazy little sister we had to lock up. Everyone here knows it." Jasper's hand tightened on Isabel's waist, his voice cutting in, cold and sharp. "Back off, Abigail. You're about to lose everything." Daniel and Eleanor approached, their faces a mask of forced calm. "Isabel," Daniel said, his tone clipped, "this isn't the place. Leave quietly, and we'll forget this happened." "No," Isabel replied, her voice steady. "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore." She pulled a USB drive from her clutch, holding it up. "This has everything. The fake diagnosis, the stolen trust fund, your lies. I'm done being your secret." The crowd murmured, heads turning as Isabel raised her voice. "They locked me in a hospital for 6 years," she said, her words ringing out. "Called me crazy to steal what was mine. But I'm not crazy. I'm their daughter, the one they threw away." Eleanor gasped, clutching Daniel's arm. "That's absurd," she stammered. "She's delusional." Jasper stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "It's all here," he said, nodding to the USB. "Bank records, your own words on tape. You're finished." Daniel's face paled, but Abigail lunged, grabbing Isabel's arm. "You're ruining us," she spat. "You'll always be nothing." Isabel yanked free, her voice rising with years of pent-up pain. "I was nothing to you, but I'm everything now." She turned to the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "They took my life, my name, my mother's legacy. I'm taking it back." The room erupted, reporters snapping photos, guests whispering in shock. Abigail dropped to her knees, her voice shrill. "I'm sorry, Isabel, please, don't do this." Isabel looked down at her, her heart cold. "You don't deserve my mercy," she said, turning away. "You never did." Jasper pulled her close, his arm a shield as security escorted the Graysons out, their empire crumbling in real time. The crowd parted, staring at Isabel with a mix of awe and pity, but she didn't care. She'd won, her truth laid bare for the world to see. As they left the hotel, the night air cool against her skin, Jasper stopped her on the steps, his hands framing her face. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with pride. "I've never seen anyone so strong." She smiled, exhaustion mingling with relief. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me my voice back." He kissed her, deep and fierce, the city lights blurring around them. "You always had it," he murmured against her lips. "I just helped you find it." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the weight of the night settling around them. But as they drove back to Malibu, Isabel's mind churned. She'd reclaimed her past, her inheritance, her name, but at what cost? The Graysons were ruined, yet the victory felt hollow. She glanced at Jasper, his profile sharp in the dim light, and wondered if this love could survive the wreckage. "I've got everything now," she thought, her hand resting on his. "But what if I lose him?" Jasper felt her gaze, his own thoughts a tangled mess. He'd fought for her, risked his reputation, his peace, but the letter from his mother haunted him. Protecting Isabel was his duty, a debt paid, but loving her was his choice, one that scared him more than any boardroom battle. "She's my whole world now," he realized, his grip tightening on the wheel. "And I'll be damned if I let her go." The car rolled through the night, the ocean a distant roar beside them. Isabel leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "What happens next?" she asked, her fingers tracing his. He glanced down, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "We build something new," he said. "You and me. No more secrets, She nodded, a tear slipping free. No more secrets, she echoed, her heart swelling with a love she hadn't known she could feel. The gala had been her triumph, a reckoning with the past, but this moment, this quiet promise, was her future. Jasper pressed a kiss to her hair, the road stretching ahead, uncertain but theirs. They'd faced the storm together, their scars laid bare, and found something stronger in the aftermath. A love forged in truth, unbreakable even by the shadows that... The Malibu night was still, the ocean whispering softly against the shore as Isabel Grayson stood on the balcony of Jasper Reed's villa. It was hours after the chaos of the charity gala in Los Angeles, the confrontation with the Graysons still echoing in her mind. She wore the same black gown, now slightly wrinkled, her hair loose and tousled by the sea breeze. The city lights glittered in the distance, a world she'd reclaimed but didn't fully belong to anymore. Her hands rested on the railing, steady now, though her heart felt heavy with a mix of triumph and uncertainty. She'd won her freedom, her truth, but the victory left a quiet ache, a question she couldn't yet answer. Jasper stepped out behind her, his presence a familiar warmth in the cool air. He'd shed his jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, his shoulder brushing hers as they looked out at the dark waves. The silence between them was comfortable, a language they'd built over weeks of shared glances and unspoken promises. Finally he spoke, his voice low and gentle. "You're quiet. What's on your mind?" Isabel turned to him, her green eyes catching the faint light from the house. "Everything," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I got it all back tonight, Jasper, my name, my past, my mother's legacy. But it doesn't feel like I thought it would." He nodded, understanding flickering in his gaze. "Winning doesn't always fix the hurt," he said. "It just gives you room to breathe." She looked down, her fingers tracing the wood of the railing. "I've been breathing for the first time in years," she admitted, "because of you. You pulled me out of that place, gave me a chance to fight. I don't know how to thank you." Jasper turned to face her fully, his hand lifting to tilt her chin up. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved me too, Isabel. I was drowning in my own life before you, cold, empty, just going through the motions. Then I heard you sing, and it woke something up. You woke me up." Her breath hitched, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "I've got everything now, but what if I lose this? What if I lose you?" He stepped closer, his hands sliding to her shoulders, firm and steady. "You won't lose me," he said, his tone unwavering. "I'm here, Isabel, for as long as you want me. You're free now, free to choose your life, but I hope you'll choose me too." She searched his face, seeing the vulnerability he rarely showed, the man beneath the billionaire's armor. "I do choose you," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "I've never felt this before, Jasper. This safe, this seen. I just don't know if I'm enough for you." He smiled, a soft, genuine curve of his lips. "You're more than enough," he said. "You're everything I didn't know I needed. I've spent my life building walls, keeping people out. You walked right through them, and I'm glad you did." Isabel reached up, her hand resting against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Promise me something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Promise we'll be honest no matter what. No more secrets." He covered her hand with his, pressing it closer. "I promise," he said. "No more secrets, just us." She nodded, a tear slipping free, and he caught it with his thumb, brushing it away. Then he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was slow, tender, a seal on the vow they'd just made. She melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, the world fading until it was just them, the ocean, and the night. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his, her breath mingling with his. "I'm staying," she said, a quiet certainty in her words. "For us." Jasper's arms tightened around her, a rare peace settling over him. "Good," he murmured, his lips brushing her hair, "because I wasn't going to let you go that easily." She laughed, a light, free sound that echoed into the night, and he joined her, the tension of the day dissolving in their shared joy. They stood there a while longer, wrapped in each other, the future stretching out like the sea before them. Isabel knew she had battles left to fight, a life to rebuild from the ashes of her past. But with Jasper beside her, it didn't feel daunting. It felt possible. She'd found her voice, her strength, and now her home. Not in a place, but in him. Jasper held her close, his thoughts mirroring hers. He'd spent years chasing success, burying his pain, but Isabel had changed that. She'd slipped into his life with a song, a glance, a courage that humbled him. He'd fought for her at the gala, stood by her as she reclaimed her truth, and now he'd fight for this, for them. "She's my heart now," he thought, his hand tracing circles on her back, "and I'll spend every day proving it." As the night deepened, Isabel stepped back, taking his hand. "Let's go inside," she said, her smile shy but bright. "I'm tired of looking back. I want to start looking forward." He followed her, their fingers laced together, the villa welcoming them with its soft glow. The door closed behind them, shutting out the past, leaving only the promise of what could be. Isabel didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether the Graysons would fade quietly or strike back, but she knew Jasper would be there, his strength a steady anchor, his love a light in the dark. Their story wasn't over, not by a long shot. It was just beginning, a chapter unwritten, theirs to shape together. Love isn't a fairy tale, not the kind with perfect endings and no shadows. It's messy, real, forged in the cracks of broken lives. Isabel and Jasper found each other in the wreckage, two souls scarred by loss and betrayal, yet brave enough to reach for something more. She'd been locked away, called crazy, stripped of everything but her will to survive. He'd built an empire, a fortress around his heart, until her voice broke through. Together they healed, not by erasing their pain but by holding it, sharing it, letting it make them stronger. Their kiss on that balcony wasn't just a moment, it was a beginning, a promise that even after the battles, the tears, the truths laid bare, they'd choose each other. Isabel didn't need a mansion or a fortune to feel whole. She needed Jasper's quiet faith, his steady hands. Jasper didn't need another victory in the boardroom. He needed Isabel's laughter, her courage, her trust. They were each other's redemption, a love born not from perfection but from the beauty of their flaws. Think about the times you felt lost, unseen, like the world turned its back on you. Then imagine someone stepping into that darkness, not to fix you but to stand with you, to see you as you are. That's what Isabel and Jasper did for each other. Their story reminds us that love doesn't demand we be whole, it asks us to be real. It's the courage to stay, to fight, to build something new from the pieces left behind. So as their night fades into dawn, as they step into an uncertain tomorrow, they carry a truth worth holding. Even the deepest scars can lead to the brightest love. What do you think their future holds? I'd love to hear your thoughts.